Another month down, another crop of new iOS and Android games, and as you know, gameranx takes the time to find you the best ones of the month. I'm Falcon, and today on gameranx, the 10 best new iOS and Android games of September 2017. Just a quick disclaimer, these are paid games. We do a free game list as well, that will come in a couple of days. Until then though, if you got a couple bucks, these are some good ones. Number 10 is the Night Watch, which is really a cool variation on chess. So essentially you're dunked into the middle of a battle scenario with chess rules. There are a few variations, like sometimes there are rocks on the board, just general things like that. The pieces are usually an odd mix, they don't follow any rhyme or reason. You just have to figure out how to get out of it. You have to use the pieces that you got in order to defeat your opponent in a game that has the same rules as chess. And if that sounds like an idea that may come off very odd when you first play it, it is. But it really does it well. If you like chess and you want something that maybe offers a little more variation, maybe something to keep you on your toes a little bit, oh yeah, this is that. Number 9 is Codex of Victory, and something I just have to say right off, there is just not enough turn-based strategy on mobile that is worth playing. Thankfully, there are games like Codex of Victory that fill in that space. So if you're familiar with base building in any RTS game, it's very much like that, but the combat itself is turn-based. This will henceforth be referred to as the strategy mullet. Real-time base building up front, turn-based combat in the back. You kind of have the ant farm style base building, an overworld, and really just elements that have come from all over the strategy genre. Like, you feel like you're playing XCOM a lot, but randomly you'll also feel like you're playing Command and Conquer. It's a game that really melds some disparate ideas together very well. Number 8 is Don't Starve Shipwrecked, which has been out on other platforms but has finally made its way to Android, and anyone who has dunked their toes into the goodness that is Don't Starve but wants to play Shipwrecked on their Android phone up until September didn't have the chance. Now, if you enjoy the survival roguelike or its predecessor, there's not going to be a lot that surprises you. There's lots of new things and improvements, and now it's on Android, which as far as I'm concerned is a huge positive. But if you're even vaguely familiar with Don't Starve at this point, I think you probably know what you're getting, and fortunately enough, what you're getting is quality. Number 7 is 8 Minute Empire, an adaptation of the board game that does exactly what its title tells you it does. It's a 10-turn board game in which you have to grow an empire, and there's not a lot of time to do it. Like the title says, the games happen over the course of about 8 minutes total. Now, that's not to say every game is going to be 8 minutes exactly on the dot or anything like that, but the thing I think that's most worth mentioning is the amount of depth that this game goes into over the course of a 10-turn game. And what's nice, you can play it multiplayer in just about any way you can imagine. There's obviously single-player AI, but you aren't limited by that. You can have pass and play, you can play it synchronously, and you can even play it asynchronously. Basically, as long as there's somebody else interested in playing with you, you can do it. As far as I'm concerned, this is an amazingly good board game, but as far as the mobile space, I would almost say it works better. I don't know, I'd definitely say give it a shot. Number 6 is Through the Ages. Through the Ages is a strategy board game. It's very much along the lines of a Civ, although it is more of a card-based game than, say, Civilization, for instance. It is a board game at its core. It is also one of the better board games, having the full game actually named the number 2 strategy board game of all time by Board Game Geek. This version contains that actual full version of the game as well as a streamlined digital version, and don't worry if you don't know how to play the game, it is complex, but there is a very good tutorial that will make you laugh, which in my opinion always helps with making you learn. Add in pass and play as well as online multiplayer, and you have a recipe for a hell of a time. Number 5 is Another Lost Phone Laura's Story, which if you played the original Lost Phone, you probably know what you're getting, but just in case. It's somewhere between a puzzle game, an investigative game, and an interactive novel, in which a young woman by the name of Laura disappears, you find her phone, and you use her phone to piece together what happened. Now, given the title Another Lost Phone, and the overall interface and everything about it, you might think, well, this is kind of like just the same game again, but it's really not. A lot of the mechanics are similar, yes, but the narrative itself is definitely different enough and as rich with characterization as the first. Although it's not for the squeamish if abusive relationships aren't really something you want to delve deep into, this is not the place to go, but sometimes a heavy story is the best kind. Number 4 is The Witness, finally making its way onto iOS. The Witness is kind of tough to describe. It is a puzzle game, but it's also a large, non-linear environment to explore, and the difference between the environment and the puzzles itself is not a fine line, it's a very blurry one. This is a great game, but be forewarned, it can get a little bit repetitive. It's not a big ding, but unless you're prepared for some of that, it may not be as good. That being said, this is an amazing game. To give you little warnings about negatives about it is just to remind you that as good as anything is, it's unfair to expect something to be perfect. Number 3 is Morphite, which I've seen described as No Man's Sky, but with a point several times now by several different people. And although I do want to acknowledge that No Man's Sky has come a long way, Morphite is kind of that. It's kind of like No Man's Sky with a point. It's got a story, it has handcrafted levels on top of procedurally generated worlds, and this really isn't to take a crap on No Man's Sky because they've put a lot of effort into making that game something that isn't a disaster, and they've done it, but it suffers from a main point, and that is that there isn't a main point. I definitely like games that have some form of narrative, and Morphite does. It's actually a decent narrative as well. But something I think it actually does better than No Man's Sky as well is the type of graphics. It embraces the whole idea of low polygon, and what it ends up with is much cooler looking in my opinion. Similar color scheme, totally 80s aesthetic though. And I'm really trying not to be unfair to No Man's Sky because I've been very harsh on that in the past, but this game is better. It's definitely better, at least in my opinion, and it's like much cheaper. Number 2 is Thimbleweed Park, a brand new adventure game from the creators of Monkey Island and Maniac Mansion. Now, in every single possible way, this is a successor to those games, and it is a very welcome successor. When I say successor, I don't mean exact replica either. There are a lot of modern game design things that have crept in, and not things that are unwelcome. The graphics, though still pixel art, are much more on par with what you'd expect now, and there's some conventions that have been adopted as well. Also, it's important to note that this is a very funny game. In a lot of ways, that's one of the biggest modern updates. It's very funny, consistently making jokes. Older adventure games were funny, but the humor was kind of a bonus. In Thimbleweed Park, it's one of the features. And yet another feature is that it is spooky and at times genuinely unnerving. If you like point-and-click adventure games but only like playing one of them a year, this would be the one you should pick for that. But I hope that that's not a limit you've placed on yourself because that's kind of weird. And finally, number 1 is Iron Marines, which is just in every way the successor to StarCraft that mobile needed, because there's probably never going to be a StarCraft game on mobile. But I'm going to go ahead and say this, I'm not sure we really need one now. Yeah, the graphic style's a little bit different. It's a little more cartoony. That's fine though, because it's aesthetically a good kind of cartoony, kind of a 90s cartoony, but with a more recent color scheme. And if I were to say a lot about this, I'd end up delving into a comparison with StarCraft, and that's frankly how much like StarCraft this is, except with a damn good mobile interface that just works better than probably any other RTS on mobile. And I don't say that lightly because there are some pretty good RTSs, there's just nothing on this level. This is the best yet, period. I will be playing this for the foreseeable future. This is a really damn good game, and I highly, highly recommend it. What was your favorite paid iOS and Android game this previous month of September? Leave us a comment, let us know what you think, and if you enjoyed this video, please click like. If you're not subscribed, now would be a great time to do so. We upload brand new videos every day of the week, and the best way to see them first is, of course, a subscription. As always, we thank you very much for watching this video. I'm Falcon. You can follow me on Twitter at Falcon the Hero, and we'll see you next time right here on gameranx.